The Curves for Rectangles ruler is one of a series of rulers designed by Carla Alexander for creative grids that makes it possible to cut curves in squares, rectangles, and other quilts to add motion to your quilts without any of the hassle and additional work. In this particular case, you can cut rectangles of several different sizes, and by placing the ruler over the rectangles that were cut, in my example, it's a 7 by 9 inch rectangle, I can cut a curve with a rotary cutter very easily. You may want to practice on scratch fabric because it takes a little bit of practice to get the curve, but it is very simple. Now, before I pick these two pieces apart, I am going to let them lay on the cutting mat so that I can mark the diagonal across here to give me a registration mark to pin these together so I can sew the curve. Now, once I have done it to that side, I am going to shuffle the deck, which is a technique that Carla shares in her books, and I am going to put this on top. If you notice, all the fabrics are right sides together so that when I am sewing those curves, they will match. You do not put the fabrics right sides together like you would in a traditional block. All of these blocks, by the way, are trimmed down when the curve is sewn, so it does not have to be perfect. You have a little bit of wiggle room when you're putting these together. Now I am going to take these and put the chalked line right sides together and pin right in the middle. And by pinning the top and bottom seam, the ruler allows for a 5/8 inch straight edge when you are doing this, which means when you sew that, you will end up with a 1/4 inch straight seam allowance, so I can sew these together and match my curves when sewing them into a block. This is going to end up being a curved rectangle. I pin this and use a needle down position so that I can keep manipulating the fabric with a stiletto, and it is very easy to do, and you only have to use 3 pins. See what a gentle curve that is? Now, to make that easier, Carla attaches this tape made by Alicia's Adding called in Q-Tool Sewing Edge. She attaches that a 1/4 inch away from her needle, and because it has a slight lip to it and it makes it very easy to run these curves next to that piece so that I will have a 1/4 inch seam. Once that 1/4 inch seam is sewn, I am going to end up with a block like this, and if you notice, the curve is an outside curve in the light blue, and on the mirror image, this is an outside curve on the dark fabric. I need to square this up to size, so I am going to just use a 9.5 inch standard Creative Grids ruler, and I am going to place it so that the straight edge up here is at least a 1/4 inch on that seam, so I have the right angle that I need to sew these together. And so my points will match if I want to sew this into an elongated pinwheel. I will square up 2 sides and turn this around. And this time I need to measure and see how big I can make it because I want all of these to end up being the same size in my finished project. In this case, it would be very easy to trim them all down to 6 1/4 inches. And so I'm going to line this side up here, and in this case, it would be 8.5 inches or 8 1/4 inches. So every rectangle in my finished project would be the same size. I can square these up any way I want to as long as I have a 1/4 inch at the corner for my seam allowance. It doesn't matter, but I need all of these to be the same size so I can incorporate them all into the same project. Normally, when you are cutting your rectangles and you're sewing them into a size, the finished size is going to be about 1 inch less than the size of the square that you originally